Welcome to Mandate Democracy, Forums on Directions, today from Georgia, featuring an interview with the Reverend Craig Johnson, a Citizen of the Year in Georgia, and discussing his career uniquely overlapping law enforcement and the ministry, accompanied by his son, Delaware State University graduate student in public policy, Christian Johnson. I'm your moderator today. My name is Les Fettig. I'm the managing director of Mandate Democracy. And Reverend Johnson brings us a unique career perspective, overlapping one of the great healing opportunities for America, and that is equality and justice for all. You'll hear from the Reverend reflecting on our condition, the prospects for Mandate Democracy from his unique perspective as a DEA agent, FBI Academy director, instructor, moving to his second career as he'll feature the power of love thy neighbor and what it means to serve the least among us. Please join us and enjoy the Reverend Craig Johnson's viewpoints that he brings us, perspectives on democracy from Georgia. A very timely event.
Reverend Johnson and I have had quite a time to talk about the issues that Mandate Democracy confronts. And he and I, in our previous conversations, which he'll describe, got very much to the heart of the matter that he sees it from a combined plane of a career in law enforcement, criminal justice, street crime, narcotics, DEA agent. So Reverend Johnson is a walking, living embodiment of what we're trying to accomplish and must accomplish. As Einstein said, no laws will work if our citizens are not citizens behaving with a sense of tolerance to each other, because we are in dark times right now. Not just the pandemic, we've got the partisan plague, and we've got the social collapse, intolerable inequalities that cannot stand, yet a gridlocked government that can't and won't meet the needs and aspirations of our people. The light we bring can always overcome darkness, and that's what we're doing here. And certainly through people like Reverend Johnson, who I'm happy to say has joined our board, thanks to one of our energetic representatives, his son, Christian Johnson. You know, he's currently the pastor for a smaller congregation. He's also put in 20 years Antioch Baptist Church, which is the civil rights megachurch in Atlanta. It dates back to 1870, I think, and has been the home and the crucible for a lot of the civil rights movement, which came out of Atlanta, you know. Dr. King, Ebenezer Baptist, C.T. Vivian, Joseph Lowery, then just plain John Lewis, not Congressman John Lewis with the broken skull. He's been named by the Georgia Secretary of State as Citizen of the Year for Georgia. So all around, it's been a very rewarding experience for me too, which I'm happy to share with our Mandate Democracy family. Although this is just a natural kitchen table meeting and session of people who are all concerned about and interested in the condition of our politics and our country. So we're a podcast, just a little bit of interviewing back and forth. I'm interested to hear what you all have to say about sin and sinners, you know, nonviolence. Rev, your first observation was how do we find truth to start with? Let me introduce two people that are very well known to Mandate Democracy. One from, for some time now, Christian Johnson from Delaware State University. We were very fortunate to have Christian sign up. He now joins going on 150 reps around nationwide, and we're processing over 1,000 who want to join our movement here for Mandate Democracy, which in simple terms is designed to educate, empower, and enforce the direct voting will of the citizens, we the people. We're doing that in a special way that transcends the parties, surmounts the politicians and propaganda. Our theme and our motto is one person, one vote, direct on your cell phone, cyber secure, privacy protected, votes that matter, no matter who's elected. Why don't we just start freeform and give your views on the current situation of our governance system, where we need to shine the light and why, and how does it look from your very powerful career in both law enforcement and the ministry?
I'm trying to figure out where I should start. Well, let me just start with today. One of the shameful things in our government is that we had 126 Republican senators to support a false narrative on voter fraud. And also, I think it was like 17 attorney generals throughout the nation. That is pathetic to try and push a false narrative, a lie about a corrupt election, which we've been told now that has been the most secure election in the history of the United States. I guess my major point is I am appalled and I am upset how the government, certain individuals in the government, have supported a false narrative, which is a lie. Because what we've seen actually are people in the government put in office trying to subvert the Constitution of the United States of America, which we don't have time for that. I don't think that there's been a time that this has been done even since the Civil War, is what we're seeing now, and it has to stop. So that's why I applaud you with mandate democracy. But I guess what else I can say is the problem is that people worship money and power. That's where the problem lies. You know, I have to go over to the Bible, right? I always have to do that. Bible says you're supposed to have no other gods before you. But in all actuality, the God of the power to be of the United States has been money and power. God is not prioritized in their lives. They only say the word God, but God is not a priority in their lives. The priority happens to be money and power, bottom line, is what we're seeing now, and it has to stop. And that's the problem of what we're experiencing now.
This is much like you introduced when we first talked, when I asked, how do we overcome it? The divisiveness in this country is fueled by, on purpose, the parties, just as you say. And talk about idolatry. The powers of this country in our governance are indeed money fueled, interest fueled, and not people fueled. That's why I'm so delighted that you and Christian understand what we're trying to do here. That slide I used some time back on Einstein saying that we can't have a democracy if we don't have a sense of social tolerance of each other, which, of course, Reverend, I don't have to say to you, is the core ethos of all the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We have members from all these faith communities, and to boot, Hindu, Sikh. God bless America. Reverend, you were saying, how do we overcome mandate democracy? Is Pluribus Unum. We're going online, one person, all persons, one vote, direct, cyber secure, privacy protected. Where do we get by finger pointing over fraud or not fraud? It's like saying, which is the worst devil that you'd like? And those are the choices. We need better choices. We wish our leaders well, but our leaders need to be instructed where we want them to lead. Maybe Christian can comment on that from the standpoint of youth, because the numbers show the American people at large, if their voice could ever be heard, are very much in accord with what the Reverend just said.
Yes.
What was it? A heart poll just this year. Do you agree that the government's out of control? 80% said yeah. Mm. And Christian knows. Pew did a poll. We never hear this. Do you agree or disagree and support that the people should vote directly on the laws that control the country, not the elected politicians? Christian, how does it look? I know you're deeply involved with Corey and other HBCUs now. Talk to everyone a little bit about you millennials are going to have to save this country. It's your turn. We haven't done a very good job of it. Just reflect, if you would, on characteristically how your generation is looking at it.
Yeah, well, like you said, as far as government, we do feel like the government's out of control. Like one thing that you say, you shouldn't let a dead man dictate something of the future and of of your life. So one thing I feel like is more important that mandate democracy stresses is that we need to have a say so in the policies of what goes on. Because it's one thing to depend solely on one politician or 435 politicians or 100 politicians down here in the Senate to dictate what really happens in your life. It really needs to have to have some type of cooperation between us and these politicians to where that we can have some say so on what goes on. And this is why mandate democracy is so important, especially in today's time. You see, we have, what's the number? About 30 million, 40 million people waiting for eviction. Correct me if I'm wrong, around that number.
I think you got it about right. It's going up because as we sit here today, the Congress is gridlocked again. They can't even pass a COVID relief bill. And I think the numbers, if you add foreclosures and evictions, and the moratoriums being taken off by Christmas, nice gift. They're already filing the papers. Who runs this country? The lawyers and the bankers? Well, the power of another institution, forget about the parties, forget about the executive, don't ignore them. We're a constitutional rebellion is what we are.
Most definitely.
The centers that we should be relying on and prominent, which are in the hearts of the people if they ever got in charge, are religious priorities of caring for your fellow man, brotherhood, and reconciliation. We've allowed that to be shredded with the encouragement of both parties who have plenty of promises, but for 40 years, not enough results. So your number is actually low, Christian. And God help America over this next month. Not to mention what's happening with COVID, but excuse me for correcting your numbers. What do you and Corey talk about when you contact the other HBCUs? And how do you couch what has to be a message of hope and light that we will overcome this with a proper morality? I guess that's a question that I'd like to hear from both you and the Reverend.
Well, what me and Corey do when we just sit down with some of our, fellow people that go to our school, HBCU, Delaware State University, and also people say that we've just contacted one school in particular, Bethune-Cookman. One thing we say is that we really need a change in our government, and we know that they feel the same way. And looking at all the stuff that we've been through this year, from COVID to not being able to do the things that we want to do, graduations being canceled, things like sports being canceled because a lack of action on our government. I feel like we really say, like, don't you want this change that we really need? Don't you feel that there's something that we can do as people in order to change the situation that we have going on right now? And so when we do that, we usually have a high success rate. And everybody that we really talk to seems like very interested in what we're doing. So by doing that, we get more people more interested in mandate democracy. More people wanted to push forward for this change. This, more for votes that matter, policies over politicians, over parties. And like you said, we're not anti-politician. We're just for more cooperation between us and the citizens and also the politicians. We're more for cooperation between the people of the United States and the politicians. That's what we really want.
And so that's our message when we go and sit down with these people that we talk to that go to these HBCUs, and not just the HBCUs, but also other colleges that we know about. So that's the main message that we really push for.
In the world of spirituality, which has to be a power center that comes to the fore now, how would you minister to two people that are so badly divided now? People who are immersed in this extremists of Proud Boys on one side and Antifa on the others, and let's tear this down and let's riot about this. How can you preach reconciliation to these divided communities of America? How do you bring the gospel to bear?
Well, like I said, I've been ministering, in ministry for about 20 years now, and I've been pastoring the Calvary Hill Baptist Church for about going on 7 years now. The key to it is truly loving thy neighbor thyself, period. And we're not seeing that. And one of the main issues, people believe false narratives too much. And people are governed by fear. Because like I said earlier, we're talking about the real God is power and money. But people, everybody wants to have a seat at the table. And I'm glad now that we're seeing a change, even with President-elect Biden letting everybody have a seat at the table, because we know we've had an issue with racism within this country for years and years and years since its inception. All right, but this nation is made up of all people, and all people need to have a seat at the table, and we have to love thyself. Like you were calling out all the religions. All the different religions believe in that. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Be humble. And as far as the leaders are concerned, every leader knows you have to know how to follow to lead. And I think now I'm going to just take a left turn right here. But even during the political field, I'm not an expert in politics, but it bothers me, and I'm confused on why we have to have an electoral college. Why can't, this is a democracy, so why can't the majority of the people who cast their vote for a candidate, that should be it? Whoever got the majority vote of the people. I believe the Constitution says something like this government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. So why do we have to have an electoral college? This is a democracy, but in order to get people to come together, you have to truly love your neighbor as yourself. You have to have a humble spirit, and you have to be above putting yourself first and put others first. We all are people. We all are connected together. And this division that we're seeing has been going on for too long. Now, our young people that I like to see right now, our young people are better than when we were. Because young folk, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, they're pretty much not going for this mess that's going on right now, the majority of them. But the key is you got to love your neighbor, and the power cannot be just controlled by one group of people. And that's the problem there too, Brother Fettig. The real issue is people are afraid of who's going to be in control of the power. Unperceived power, I may say. God is the only one with the power. It's unperceived power. There's enough. You mentioned, you and Christian mentioned about people being unemployed, people being laid off, millions of people around Christmas time. This is the richest country in the world. And you mean to tell me that you got people up in Washington, D.C. that are depriving people of a stimulus check, unemployment money, to take care of their families. And we pay their salaries. That does not compute to me. We pay their health insurance. They get their money from our tax money. It is the people's money. I know we got all religions on here, but excuse me. We have to truly walk the way Christ wants us to walk and stop doing a lot of lip service. And that even goes in Christianity itself. Because if you call yourself a Christian, how could you support not feeding the hungry? How can you support not taking care of those who are sick if you call yourself a Christian? I don't care what denomination you are, Baptist, Holy Sanctified, Presbyterian, Lutheran, Catholic, I don't care what denomination you are. How can you justify not taking care of the least of these? That's where it starts.
How can you explain what, and I'm not the only or the first to observe, this inconceivable alignment of the evangelical community with an ethos that seems not to be founded on our religious heritage? We have an alignment that others would call an idolatry to party, as opposed to the principles of our finest humanitarian instincts. What's happening? We talk about our institutions degrading. What's happened to our faith communities that they seem to now have lost their way as an institution? Let's forget about the Supreme Court. If we're going to look to empower the good heart of the American people, why are we seeing not just the silence, but what many would say the hypocrisy of the alignment of certain religious communities that seem to worship people and parties? How did that happen, and how do we fix it?
First of all, I guess it starts with a prayer, and it starts with facing the truth. See, the Bible tells us that there will be a time where people will believe a lie before they believe the truth. And that's where we are now. People don't really want to be corrected. Some folk don't really want to do the right thing. They want to do their own thing. So a lot of people are trying to twist the word of God to make the word comfortable to them. But see, the word of God now, it cuts going in and it cuts going out. There's supposed to be some bleeding, and you're supposed to have some conviction after that bleeding. Because we need to be corrected. We are fallible human beings. We all fall short of the glory of God, and that's what we're seeing right now. And it starts in the church. When the church, certain churches, when they twist the word to fit themselves, when they twist the word to make themselves seem better than someone else, it's wrong. I tell my congregation all the time, if your faith is only as high as the pulpit, your faith is too low. To get us back, it starts in the church. Over there in Malachi, they had a problem with the priests in the church because they were doing stuff that they were subverting the law of God to suit themselves, as opposed to doing what thus saith the Lord to take care of the people. And that's our major problem right now. It's our problem in the church. That's our problem in our politics. It's just spread. This type poison is dangerous, and that's what we are seeing right now.
Well, as Congressman Lewis said, we ought to be about doing some good trouble, Reverend.
Yeah.
I'm excited about the condition of our country. I've spent my years on the Senate and the White House West Wing, and I can tell people see how our country works and why it doesn't work. And I'm more convinced than ever. That reminds me of Ben Franklin at the Constitutional Convention. He basically said, look around at the mess we're creating here. Nobody can get along with each other. You know what he suggested? He filed a motion to George Washington, who was president of the Constitutional Convention. He said, Mr. President, I move that this assembly conducting here start every session with a prayer. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And to this day, even today, when the House of Representatives and Senate convene, who's got the gavel? A minister of every religion. God bless America. And we start our day with a prayer, and then we forget it, don't they? We, engineers and political scientists like me and Christian, we can invent mechanisms to connect the people and empower their voice to control it. But the basis has to come from our morality. And where does that come from? Men, by their constitution, our hearts, are naturally divided into two parties. Well, he didn't name them, but we can project. Those who fear and distrust the people, and those who identify themselves with the people, have confidence in them, cherish and consider them as the most honest and safe depository of the public interest. Do you trust your fellow man? And do you respect each other? Do we have social tolerance that Einstein says? Because, said Jefferson, my conviction is this mandate democracy coming. He predicted we were coming. My conviction is that should things go wrong at any time, the people will rise and set them to rights by the peaceable exercise of their elective rights. I have great confidence in the common sense, and more, that's just what the Reverend's talking about. I have great confidence in the common sense of mankind in general. Going into the Christmas season, for all religions, hearing from the Reverend in what should be the power community of the country is very timely. And it wasn't like we didn't know it. It's people have to stand up for it now, collect the people's voice, and have government by the governed instead of the other way around, which is exactly what the right wing is complaining about too. Huh?
I want to say one thing. What is the most valuable resource in this country and in the world? Just think about it. What is the most valuable resource? You want me to get an answer? The most valuable resource are people. That is the most valuable resource, not a person. And that's the problem. We have persons that have been put in power by people who try to dictate what the people should get and what they don't get. The most valuable resource are the people. And our government has a responsibility to take care of the people, not to neglect the people, not to take advantage of the people, but it is to take care of the people. And see, when the government stops taking care of the people, what has happened, corruption has come to place in the person and gave the person it's not an actual truth, but it has gave the person the belief that he or she is in control and in power of everything, and it is about them. But it's never about the president of the United States. It's never about the senator. It's never about the congressman. It is about the people. Everyone put in leadership has a responsibility to serve the people, not to try to control the people, but to serve the people. And that's where it's lost.
Well, Christian knows that of the 3 E's that we're trying to put into effect here, it's called participatory direct democracy. But our 3 E's are we have to educate the people. Jefferson said inform, that's a starting point. You mentioned our first conversation, where's the truth? We need the facts to deal with first. So we try to educate, empower through direct votes on policies, and then enforce. Now, that third E, a lot of people aren't comfortable with it, but it's a necessary final voice that you're leading up to, Reverend. Should be up to the people to say whether or not we are getting representatives who represent. Like Napoleon says, his political theory was promise anything, deliver nothing. He got away with that, and we let too many of ours get away with that. You want to think, talk simply. So that's why our enforcement mechanism is not, certainly not, we put you in office and expect you to keep your promises. Where have we heard that before? Huh?
Yeah.
But that final E is mandate democracy runs another kind of referendum at the end of the first 2 years of these servants, is the word, servants' term, which is a popular referendum to say you are not doing the will of the people. You are not voting the way your constituents voted on policies and priorities. And we say, probably in supermajority in most cases, why don't you step down? Why don't you resign? What's your attitude about the expectations for the new administration? We all wish them well. We want them to act, not promise. How shall the people organize? We're trying to organize their voice for that triple E effect. Coming at it from your base of the faith communities, how do we get that combination sense of impatience? I can't take it anymore. With resolve, it's got to be changed. How do you weave that together in a sermon that people will say, I think the Reverend is right?
First of all, I think it has to do a lot with patience. We're going to have patience because it's not going to be easy for the new administration coming in. Number one, patience. We have to get past these terms like conservative and liberal, because now I'm speaking to myself. You can't put me in a box to say that I'm conservative or liberal, because I'm conservative about a lot of things and I'm liberal about some things. But I don't know how you can tag a person with that. See, to me now, this is just to me. The way they define conservative and liberal really doesn't make sense. In a sermon speaking to the people, patience is number one. We cannot get anything accomplished if we are divided. Number two, because a house divided against itself will fall. Not might, but it will fall. So if we want to heal the land, we have to come together. Now, the present administration is doing a lot of things so far by having a diverse team, having qualified people put in place. Now, we have to see if the Senate, no matter who wins these elections, particularly the ones down in Georgia, whether or not it's Democrat or Republican, whether or not they're going to come together to work together. Two things, Brother Fettig. Have no other God before thee. All right. And love thy neighbor as thyself. That's where the 2 of the 10 commandments come together. All 10 of the 10 commandments fall on those 2 commandments. One is to have no other God before you, One is vertical. It goes up. Love thy neighbor as thyself is horizontal. It goes like this, and that forms a cross. That's the way. That's the only way we're gonna make it. The only way, and I'm prayerful for the newest administration coming in, because another thing, so many people have died during this pandemic. So many people have died, not just Democrat death, not just Republican death, but people death. And I'm glad we have somebody in there that has the common sense not to prioritize self, but prioritize the people. And that's what we need, and that's what we are suffering from right now. So I guess that's the only way. And matter of fact, I've been doing that even before the pandemic, but that's the only way that we're going to be able to make it. We got to come together. You know, the black, the white, the Hispanic, the Asian, the racism, that's totally ignorant. And the reason that is ignorance, because it results from ignorance. It's because of fear. A lot of white people fear black people. That's number one. And fear comes from ignorance, because we don't take the time to treat one another with respect, sit down and talk to one another like human beings, and realize that we got more in common than anything different. That's where it comes. Back again, I hate to keep saying it, love thy neighbor as thyself. But that's the key. That's the key for this administration coming in.
Reverend, that's the culmination of a message, not just for this upcoming season of religious holidays, but that's the message for the country to stop and think about right now.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Directions in Democracy, brought to you by Mandate Democracy. Let us all take pride and cherish America as the greatest champion of freedom and democracy that has ever been seen. Let us take pride in it and join together to overcome the dark times of division and the difficulties of our social economic inequalities, and to refresh the vitality of our democracy. We are, after all together in this Pluribus Unum. We're reminded by President Lincoln that we, in the end, are the masters who must defend our Constitution against those who would overthrow it. That we, say Jefferson and Madison, are in control of our government and not the other way around. Thank you for joining us. We hope we'll see you at future episodes of Directions in Democracy.